All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. Is it Thursday? Wednesday? I think it's Thursday. I got to get my head together. October 9th, year of our Lord 2025. And we are going to start today. And I just want to give the eulogy to the Yankees. You know, I'm not a Yankees fan, but I've always had a soft spot in my heart. Maybe not always, but, maybe in my last decade or so, I've had a soft spot in my heart for the Yankees. And I cheer for the Yankees when they're not playing the Mets, and their season ended yesterday. But I have to say this, and as a non-Yankees supporter, I think honestly that what happened was actually really good for baseball, because the Blue Jays, who I don't follow that closely, the way they played this series was awesome. It was like real baseball. I mentioned this in a video previously that I like the Brewers because they play real baseball. And what I mean by that is they're just putting the ball in play. They don't have to hit home runs, although they're capable of it. They hit base hits and they'll string hits together. Excuse me. They play solid defense, and all of that. That's real baseball. The Yankees play home run derby, and they're really good at it. They hit a lot of home runs. They're slugging like crazy, but you can't count on it. It's very streaky, and they don't play good defense. And most teams in Major League Baseball play home run derby. In fact, the Mets play home run derby. I really don't like that about the Mets. Now, the Mets play home run derby. They're not as good at it as the Yankees, and so they didn't even make the playoffs. But most teams are out there trying to replicate what the Yankees do, where, you wait for your pitch, and then you swing at your pitch, and you're kind of guessing at the plate. That's why they take a lot of it's unbelievable to me how many times Yankees hitters, and the Mets do this too, so not hating on the Yankees, they just take these strikes right down the plate, and you wonder to yourself, why did they do that? Sometimes they're fooled by the pitch, of course, but other times they're just guessing that they're not going to be thrown a strike, so they don't swing. And then when they do swing at something off the plate, yeah, sometimes they're fooled, but sometimes they're just guessing it's going to be a fastball. And it's really, really frustrating and annoying. If you notice, the Blue Jays don't do that. The Blue Jays approach every pitch like, I'm going to try to put this in play. Maybe I won't do damage, but I'll put it in play. I'll get on base, and the next guy will do the same thing. And before you know it, I'll be at home plate. The Brewers play that way. Apparently, I didn't know this, but the Blue Jays play that way. And I really like that because I can't stand the home run derby style of baseball. The Yankees perfected it, and other teams are fine. The Phillies play this way too. It's the same kind of thing, and that's why the Phillies probably won't beat the Dodgers. The Dodgers, in my opinion, they go back and forth. Sometimes they're playing home run derby, sometimes they play regular baseball, but they're a more complete team. We'll see. Maybe the Phillies will get there, but hats off to the Blue Jays. They're a Canadian team, so I can only like them so much. But they play they play a more entertaining brand of baseball than what the Yankees do, or the Mets, or the Phillies, or any of these teams. So very, very cool. The other thing is, before we get started, I'm over here like a stock trader, even though I don't really trade. But looking at the price of silver, unbelievable. Crossed the $50 an ounce barrier, which is just, I don't know, man. I'm well positioned for the rise in gold and silver and stuff like that, and so I feel like relatively at ease with all of this, but it's not like a good thing though. It's definitely not a good thing. The fact that gold is over $4,000 an ounce and silver is over $50 an ounce. And I got to be honest, I believe that silver is going to go much higher than this. That's not investing advice, by the way. Silver is notoriously fickle and risky and all this stuff. So I'm not telling you to go out and buy a bunch of silver, unless you want to, because I happen to like silver. But this is not good though. I'm a contrarian when it comes to the investments, and so I'm positioned for it. But it's not a good sign. And just because your investment portfolio goes up doesn't mean that life in general is just going to be peachy. I just don't think that is a very good sign. In fact, I think it's a very bad sign that gold is over $4,000 an ounce. I mean, an ounce is not that much. An ounce is not that much. $4,000 an ounce, $50 an ounce in silver. I'm ready for it, but is anyone really ready for it? I don't know. I don't know, because these are bad. These are terrible signs. That nobody should be like, oh, if you got like your silver, and gold bug friends and they're all excited, but there's no like trepidation. I don't really know if they know what's going on. I mean, this is not great. It's not great. In any case, now that we've gone 5 minutes talking about my little pet projects and all of this, let's begin. All right. Well, yesterday's video, I talked about the J.D. Greear scam, which is most definitely a scam. And, a lot of people see through it these days. So back when I was identifying these scams, 5 years ago or more, probably at this point, like, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. I don't even know how long I've been on YouTube. But back when I was doing it back then, I'd get a lot of heat, and, how could you say this about a brother in the Lord and all this kind of stuff. Nowadays, everybody kind of knows the scams and what's going on with the scams, And so most people, agree and understand the scam. Obviously, there's a lot of people who don't still, so I'm still doing these videos. But, there's some pushback, and I think that what we're getting now is evidence of how far we've pushed not only the Overton window, but how far we've identified and made it totally plain how much of a scam these scams are. Because now the pushback isn't quite so, how dare you disagree with the brother in the Lord? That's what it used to be. But now a lot of the pushback is like what Eric Reed says here. I'm just going to read it to you. He says, we should recognize in the Greear article book convos that the responses to it, that we're not disputing theology per se, it's a philosophy of ministry conversation. It's not about heresy. It's not about being a Christian. It's about ministry context decisions. People on both sides of the conversation can think the other side is doing it wrong. And these are debates worth having, but we should remember that these are arguments amongst brothers and co-laborers in the gospel. I think it's okay to think one side is approaching things in a less effective way. We've had these conversations forever. See seeker-sensitive movement and worship wars. Let's just not devour our brothers. This is, like, I agree with Eric, what he's saying here, but this is very different than the kind of pushback we got before. This is waving the white flag. You know what I mean? You guys are, okay, you got a point. Okay, let's hold off here. It's like when somebody tries to start a fight with you and then they realize that they can't beat you, and they're like, I'm good, like that kind of thing. And he's right fundamentally. I mean, I don't think that every person out there is scamming you intentionally to push bad theology and leftist politics and stuff like that from the pulpit, which I think J.D. Greear most certainly is doing that. That's my point. It's a scam. He's doing it intentionally. He's running a scam on you so that he can continue to do what he wants to do from the pulpit, which is evil, in my opinion. That's why he puts this forward. But not everybody's trying to scam you, and so we don't want to say, okay, you agree with J.D. Greear, well, you're a heretic. You know what I mean? We don't want to do that. That's not how we want to do this. But in J.D. Greear's case, it is so plainly obvious what he's doing. That he is absolutely bringing liberal theology to the table. He's bringing evil politics to the table and trying to pass it off as good. And it works itself out in real life all the time. And so, am I saying that J.D. Greear is a heretic? He's not a Christian. I'm not really saying that definitively, but I would say that like there's a lot of red flags. And I would recommend that nobody would go to J.D. Greear's church. Like if you're sitting under his leadership, you're in danger. You shouldn't go to his church. It's not a good place for your soul. It's not a good place for you and your family. That's what I would say. So whether or not he's actually a wolf or a heretic or something like that, I'm not going to comment on that. But what I will say is that what he is doing is so damaging. It's not just about a slightly different, philosophy of ministry. It's not that. It's that he's got a different philosophy of ministry, but he's also trying to push you in the wrong direction. He's doing damage to you by you being under his leadership. That's my opinion. It doesn't require me to call him a wolf or anything like that. That being said, we can see how this works out in everyday life, because I read this article that I want to comment on that is just, Man, it's not unbelievable. It's very believable, but it's well, let's just read it. Let's just read it. This is from theblaze.com, Blaze Media, and it's about Daniel Keene. Here's the article. After facing threats and extortion attempts, Daniel Keene's gym and church have apparently turned on him as well. The article goes, Daniel Keene did not expect a post on X to derail his life. The small business owner posted a video of an Indian block party taking over an entire street of his North Texas suburb and expressed his frustration at the rapid demographic and cultural changes sweeping through large swaths of greater Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex. He says, "We have to cancel the H-1Bs. I want my kids to grow up in America, not India," he wrote in the since-deleted post. The post went viral on X, and all hell broke loose. As previously reported by Blaze News, Keene and his family were subjected to doxing and threats. His business was review-bombed, and someone claimed to have access to millions of Indian American contacts apparently tried to extort him for $20,000. Keene's business, Boundaries Coffee, continues to weather the storm, and Google has shut down reviews for the business, putting a stop to the lies, threats, and insults that had flooded in. The backlash was not contained to Keene's professional life. In the midst of dealing with the attacks on his business, the owner of his gym decided to weigh in on the issue by revoking his membership. Keene received a text from Ken Williams, the owner of CrossFit Prosper, telling him, "We feel your public stance doesn't align with our core values of inclusivity and respect, and we'll be ending your membership effective immediately," according to a screenshot reviewed by Blaze News. The text took Keene by surprise, since Williams did not raise the issue when he had visited the gym. "He didn't say anything to me in person," Keene told Blaze News, "not even a peep of conflict." That's not surprising. That's not surprising. A lot of the people that are going to cancel you for, very mild takes on X, they don't have the courage or the balls to say anything to your face. They just, they have their little kingdom, and then they do what they want to do. Now, I really don't have a problem with this. This is a private business, whatever. I mean, I do have a problem with it because it's such a stupid reason to cancel a membership. But, it's your business. You should be able to do business with whoever you want, in my opinion. Of course, this doesn't apply in reverse. Typically, we all understand how the law is written, and civil rights legislation and all that. But fundamentally, philosophically, you should be able to do this kind of stuff. Let's continue. He says, in canceling the membership, Williams explained that a large part of our community is Indian, and inclusivity is central to who we are. We can't overlook how this impacts our members and staff and the culture we work hard to protect, the screenshot showed. CrossFit Prosper advertises itself as LGBTQ-owned and LGBTQ-friendly, according to its Google Maps profile. The gym did not respond to a request for comment from Blaze News. Things continue to get worse when Keene's church decided to interrogate him on his immigration stance. The elders at the Trails Church called him about his initial post, telling him to repent, and that the post was uncharitable. Keene, who deleted the post shortly after it went viral due to the stress it was causing his family, did not disavow his position on immigration and the H-1B visa in particular. He said that's when problems with the church really escalated. Keene and his wife, who was 8 months pregnant at the time, were called in for a meeting with all the elders and staff who could be there, he recalled. This time, they weren't just concerned about one post, they just hammered me for hours, he said. The elders had apparently gone through the last 3 years of Keene's X account looking for problematic posts. Keene said that they brought up 2 posts that they found concerning. You notice the language here? This is the language of Big Eva. This is the language of J.D. Greear and his friends. Concerning and uncharitable and all these kinds of words. What's so you need to understand this about this, right? When they can't be clear about what your sin is, right? When your positions aren't sin, but you know that they want to be against your positions and they want to kick you out because of your positions, what they'll say is that it's uncharitable or concerning or troubling or stuff like that. Because these people, they view these things as like an infinite power glitch, right? Because you can't say, excuse me, you can't say that having a position on H-1B visas is unchristian, right? That would be kind of akin to what J.D. Greear was talking about, well, the Bible doesn't say anything about H-1 visas, right? I mean, I gotta be careful in the pulpit, right? But so what they'll do is they'll say, well, that's a political issue. I'm not really going to talk or weigh in on that. I mean, if he does, it'll be like a little kitten in a little saucer, like drinking his little milk. And he'll say something in a very, limited kind of a way. But what they do is they take these vague sort of like overarching things about charity and about love, and they'll beat you to death with it as if it is apparently, you're uncharitable if you hold this position. And they'll kick you out. They'll get rid of you for that kind of stuff because it's uncharitable. It's uncharitable. It's an infinite power glitch. It can mean anything you want at any time. You could have any political position, and that no matter, they won't talk about the political position necessarily, but what they'll say is, you're being uncharitable and you're out unless you repent. Well, how do you repent from being uncharitable? Well, the only way is to say, well, yeah, I changed my mind about the H-1Bs. Yeah, Indians can come in anytime, and I don't care. I love living in India. That's the only way to repent of your lack of charity in this case. Because there's nothing uncharitable about believing that H-1B visas need reform or you need to get rid of them or whatever like that. There's nothing uncharitable about that. So the only way to be charitable is to say, oh, I guess I was wrong. Or maybe I was wrong, or, maybe some H-1Bs, I don't know. Like that kind of thing. Keene describes the meetings as confusing. Brother Keene, I know what you mean. I've been in these meetings myself. I've never been kicked out of a church, but I've had these meetings. And they are only confusing to you because you're trying to be logical about it. There is no logic to it. There is no logic to it. What they are trying to do is beat you to death with this vague accusation of charity or loving. It wasn't loving. You know what I mean? That's what they're trying to do. And you ask them, well, how isn't it loving? And they'll say stuff like, well, it's just obvious. If you don't know how it's not loving, I don't know how you can have the Spirit of Christ. Keene describes the meeting as confusing. The goalpost got shifted significantly, he said. Keene claimed he was unable to get a straight answer from the... Oh, brother, I have been in this situation so many times. You just say, give me an example. What exactly do you mean? And then sometimes they will give you an example, right? And they'll talk about your language of this was uncharitable, okay? And then you say, well, okay, I can understand why you might think that, but here's what I'm seeing. You know what I mean? I'm seeing in the Bible where Jesus does this and says this, and that seems like a lot worse than me. And like, I'm not saying I'm Jesus. I've done this so many times. I bend over backwards. Look, I'm not Jesus, right? But I am trying to follow his example, and I'm trying to follow the line of logic that you're using here. So what about what Jesus says makes it acceptable versus what I say making it unacceptable? And there's no answer. This is the infinite power glitch. They can't answer that question because that it takes away their whole power. They're just trying to use these vague accusations to get you out or to get you to change your mind so that then there's nothing you can do. There's no way to get them to admit that maybe there's some wiggle room here. None. Keene claimed he was unable to get a straight answer from the elders on the actual substance of his offenses. I've been there. Quote, on the one hand, they are saying that the issue is not the position itself. It's how I expressed it, he said. But then we had 3 hours of phone calls, and they're just hammering me on the position itself. Of course, because to them, the position itself is uncharitable. That's what they're saying. Even though they say they're not saying that, that's what they're saying. You can, but let me take that back a little bit. To people like this, you can believe that H-1B visas are no good. You just can't say it. Because when you say it, that's not charitable to all of your Indian brothers and sisters. So you keep it to yourself. When it's too right-wing, you keep it to yourself. You can hold it as long as you don't tell anybody. You can hold the position as long as you don't say anything about it. The minute you say something about it, that's concerning, that's uncharitable, that's unloving, now you got to leave. That's how this works. Keene, it's confusing to you because, you're a reasonable guy, right? But the way to understand this is to pretend like you're not reasonable. Pretend like you're not reasonable, and then you'll be able to understand it, okay? So yes, it's not really that the goalposts are shifting. It's that they're trying to explain something unreasonable to a reasonable guy, and they can't do that. It's not possible. So that's what happens. It's not so much that, they'll grant you, yeah, you can believe this, right? So on the one hand, you can believe it, but you can't say anything about it. Because if you say something about it, that's automatically uncharitable. You can't say this in a charitable way. So you can believe it, but you got to keep it to yourself. Keep your mouth shut, and that's how we do this. Okay? That's an unreasonable position. But you, as a reasonable person, are trying to make sense of this desperately. You're saying, but if it's a position I can hold and be a Christian, so surely I should be able to say something about it. No, you can't. That's the point. You're trying to reasonableize it. You can't reasonableize this. This is unreasonable. Keene requested that the elders put his offenses in writing. This is funny because this is the obvious response. Keene, you're smart. Put this in writing. I love to show people how insane this is. Keene requested that the elders put his offenses in writing to eliminate uncertainty, but they refused, he said. Keene expressed his confusion to the elders about the nature of his supposed offense and what he was supposed to do about it. He offered to post clarifying messages on X and to talk to anyone at the church who had found his post offensive. The elders apparently were not satisfied with an offer to clarify things. Yeah, that's right. That's right. They're not. Because you can hold these positions, you just can't tell anybody about it. So the offer to clarify is just telling more people about it. So that's to them, when you're unreasonable, to them, that's multiplying the offense. You can't explain yourself? No. That's worse. And then furthermore, that might make you seem more reasonable, which is the opposite of what they want. They want no one to know. They don't want anyone to know about this. So they want you to shut up about it, is what they want you to do. You probably did what they wanted by deleting the post, and that probably would have been sufficient. But now they want you to say, well, I was wrong to post it. This is what they want. They want you to, they don't necessarily need you to change your mind, but they need you to say, I shouldn't have said anything. I was uncharitable by saying what I believe and is totally acceptable according to biblical principles and all of this kind of stuff. That's what they wanted. But as a reasonable person, you couldn't do that because you can't just change your mind. You can, but if you don't feel like you were wrong, you're not going to say you were wrong because that would be unreasonable. That would be lying. You can't do that. You're a Christian. See, this is the thing. In order to understand this, you've got to put yourself in the mindset of these like, they're kind of weak, not confident at all in their ability to, because this is the thing. Like, if you thought the H-1B thing was ungodly, then you can easily make that case, right? And you wouldn't be so worried about someone disagreeing with you in the church. Because at the very least, if you're going by J.D. Greer's principle, the Bible is not that clear on H-1B visas, right? Not that clear. And so you can tolerate people disagreeing with your H-1B visa position, even though you don't know anything about H-1B visas. This is the other thing. These pastors likely know nothing about H-1B visas. Now, this happens to be my field, so I get all heated about this because I've talked to thousands and thousands and thousands of H-1B visa holders, and I'm not exaggerating. I talk to at least 10 H-1B visa holders every single week of my life for the last, 20 years. I don't know if that leads to thousands, but I've talked to a lot, right? A lot of H-1B visa holders. So I know all about the process. I know all about the kinds of people who get these visas. I know all about their skill set. I can even rank their skill set against everyone else. And so I can tell you what these H-1B visas are all about. I've talked to owners of companies that their whole business model is they have this army of H-1B visa holders, and they hold their visas. And then they deploy them to different, jobs across the country at a moment's notice. You say, hey, I need a database engineer over in Idaho. Oh, you need one? I got one. He can be there tomorrow. Like, that's their business model. I know all about it. Okay? These pastors likely have not talked to too many H-1B visa holders. They probably haven't ever talked to a business owner whose entire model is H-1B visas and holding them. I have, right? But so anyway, the point is, they don't know anything about this, but if they had confidence, if they were stronger men, they would be able to tolerate someone who had a different opinion on H-1B visas in their midst. But they can't do that. They're weak. They're weak. I don't even remember the point I was trying to make, but they are weak. According to Keene, they wanted him to apologize for his original post showing the Indian Bloc Party in a street and abandon his position on Indian immigration. And while he respected their right to disagree with him, Keene told Blaze News that he did not think apologizing for the post was appropriate. As far as the content, I stand behind it. That's the policy position I stand behind. When he asked how serious his offense was, the elders told Keene that he was on the path of discipline, meaning he would be removed from membership if he continued on his present course, he explained. Keene described the removal process as a very serious step in a Baptist church. They're basically saying, we don't think you're a Christian anymore because you haven't repented of a sin, he said. Keene left the meeting still confused. Shortly after, a friend sent him an episode on the King's Hall podcast discussing immigration and H-1B visas. Keene found the episode insightful and posted a clip of it along with... Oh, Keene. Keene, man. I don't know, man. I don't know if you know who I am, but we seem like kindred spirits. I'll tell you that right now. That's just something that I would do. And I'm not saying that you should do this. I'm not saying that you should do this kind of thing. But this is something that I would do. Keene found the episode insightful and posted a clip. Keene, if you want to tell your story, my podcast is available. Excuse me. And posted a clip of it along with the following questions. What would you get in more trouble at your church? Significant doctrinal error on the Trinity or opposing immigration to the harm of your neighbor? Keene said he knew the post would upset the church elders. He did try to reach out privately at first just to say, hey, hear me out on this. After he posted the clip, the elders asked him to come in with his wife for another meeting, he claimed. Keene said declined to bring his wife. Keene said he declined to bring his wife. Why would you need to meet with my wife? What does my wife have to do with this, he wondered. This is, again, a very common tactic of weak, non-confident men. Because what they're trying to do is because they know your wife is sensitive. They've tried this one with me as well. And this one, I'll be honest, when people have tried this one on me, I've thought and maybe even said some things that were not right. Sinful things. When this kind of thing happened to me, I was seeing red. This is the most... This pisses me off. I'll say that. This pisses me off because they know your wife is sensitive. They know your wife has friends at the church. They know your wife is agreeable. They know your wife likely has emotional ties to the church and doesn't want to leave. You know, maybe you have kids, maybe your kids have friends, and your wife is much more likely to put pressure on you to stay. Because think of the kids, you know, I don't want to leave. You know, I've got my friends here. I've got my connections here. Our kids have friends here and stuff like that. They go after your wife because they want to manipulate you. And the reason they do it is because it works a lot. They're not used to men that can tell their wives, I'm sorry, but we can't. The answer is no. This is the lowest of the low. This is the behavior of non-Christians, right? They think you're a non-Christian because you're against H-1B visa holders. Using women to try to manipulate the men and doing it successfully for so long, and then it's just part of your strategy now. It's part of, I know how these guys think. They're weasels. They want to meet with your wife because they're trying to manipulate you. Because they know you love your wife. They're using that love against you. That's what they're doing. They're using your love for your wife against you. And so that you see, if you're making your wife unhappy, look what you're doing to her. It reminds me of that scene in the Book of Eli. You ever see the Book of Eli? It's an okay movie. It's an interesting movie. But there's the leader of the town, Carnegie. And he wants the younger lady, Solara, to do something for him. Yeah, I think it's like to use like to like, you know. Anyway, anyway, and she doesn't want to do it. So he takes her mother, who's like supposedly his girlfriend, grabs her by the hair and says, "Look, you're hurting your mother." You know, because he's using the woman against her. That's what they're doing. They're saying, Keen, you're hurting your wife, your family. Why would you do that? This is so evil. This is so evil. And it happens all the time. It happens all the time. And you have to be really sure of yourself as a man to know that your actions, your wife's not going to be pleased with them. But you know they're right, but your wife's not going to be pleased. And to be able to just say, no, we got to stay the course. I'm so sorry, honey. I'm so sorry. But this is not what's happening here. I can't. We can't. This gets me so angry, man. This is so evil. When he went to the I'm glad he didn't bring his wife. When he went to the meeting, the elders formally asked Keen to leave the church. Keen suspected he would be asked to leave if that, and that posting the podcast clip almost guaranteed it. I knew I was poking the bear a little bit, he acknowledged. Still, Keen says he did not regret posting the clip or maintaining his position on immigration. I've been trying to draw out what the real issue is here, he said. What are the values of your church? Are they doctrinal, scriptural, or is it public policy with regard to immigration? The Trails Church did not respond to a request for comment from Blaze News. Of course they didn't. Of course they didn't. They will never do that. They will never do that because they're weak. They're weak. And the more people know about the situation, the weaker they look. They're not courageous men. They have no business leading the church. They don't have the backbone for it. They don't. And they're weasels, and they're conniving, and they're evil, they're manipulative. That's what they do. So if you want to see J.D. Greer's fantasy land of what the church ought to do for gospel centrality, this is what he has in mind. It's exactly this. This is what J.D. Greear wants, and he wants to pass it off as good. It's a scam. In any case, hope you found this video helpful. God bless.